Hi, Jamie.
Hi, hello.
Here we are again, and
Hi.
what a week it's been. I've
I,
been reading, devouring lots of your Substack posts this week, your essays, and I guess it feels time to reflect on what I know has been a really challenging week.
I, it has, and I've been, I've been dealing with kind of overwhelm that's different than kind of autistic shutdown or autistic meltdown or panic. I think it's been very unique to Gestalt processing life, and
Hmm.
so I've been writing and kind of real time in my head what's going on, and not really as therapy, but more of like in the moment, in the crisis, I've nothing to grab onto in the literature, nothing to grab onto to try to center myself to say, oh, this is happening, right? There's plenty of
Mm,
people that write about shutdown, and I've experienced it myself. I've been hospitalized because of it, so I know what that was, and this was not that. And it you can think sometimes like, oh, you just need a dram and you'll be fine, right? So this was not that. And so I had to kind of build the structure around the experience, and then kind of the tricky way in which the mind works as a Gestalt processor, as mine works, is that some of the stuff that I had written previous to this event, like very previous,
mm,
when I wrote it, I had absolutely no like, where did this idea come from? Oh, I think it came from this conversation, but for some reason, this gestalt has landed in. I need to process it. I need to write it, and I'm guessing at some point it will make sense to me. And then, as I'm coming out of this, which I guess we'll get to in a minute, what happened actually, but then I think back to that. Oh, I wrote this. Let me kind of anchor myself in this and try to narrate myself back into cohesion
mm.
and that's kind of the preface of what happened.
And I feel that that kind of through our conversations, it for me the term Gestalt language processing and is the language is just such a small aspect or just part of a much bigger picture. So when we're thinking, when we speak, I feel it's about Gestalt processing. You talk about that. You talk about how things arrive in wholes, whether it be language, meaning, the situation, the emotion, the attunement, all of that is a whole experience. And I feel that that sort of has been something that I'm really thinking about now when I'm supporting children and young people. But I think from uh, what we were talking about earlier in terms of your week, having something to pin or an experience of what was going on in your mind, um, just sounds enormous.
Well, aye, and it's scary that it happened and it could happen again. I mean, if you've read today's article and there
Mhm.
was a picture in there, and that picture is of a bunny, right? And the bunny is in my bedroom and it's dressed in a jumper that was my son's when he was that size, so 18 years ago. And you think about Gestalt processors, autistic people, and you say, we have these really crazy attachments to things, right? And so I'm 55 years old and I have a house full of plushies and, bunnies and ducks and everything. And every single one is tied to a very dear Gestalt of mine, right? This particular bunny that I shared with everybody today has a name and it has a history and it has, all sorts of words and emotions and activities and everything connected to it. And I know in dealing with parents who don't understand Gestalt processing, don't understand autism, they think, oh, you're 13 now, so you get rid of your toys, right? It's time to do big boy things, right? And I've seen it, when my family worked with the charity shop up at the mountain, when the parents would bring in, and I've written about this too, the parents would bring in this whole big basket of plush toys and say, Johnny's grown up now. He does not need these bunnies or whatever. And I'm crushed, absolutely sad, crushed that this child is losing this connection, right? And he'll never see them again. And to the extent that my wife allowed me to, I would try maybe to rescue one of them, right? And say, maybe in the future I can give this to somebody who needs it or whatever. Or she would rescue one in my absence, or. So when I say we have a house full of them, I'm not being figurative in this. Yeah, literally a house full of them. And I love them all, and the connection, the attunement is not just like I collect things, I hoard things, right? These are the physical manifestations of gestalts for me. Entire memory, emotion, everything. So I think that's a good setup to tell what happened last Saturday, in
Hmm.
that in a moment, in an instant, that connection was gone with everything. It was just the three physical dimensions, and that's it. I couldn't access, like I would look at Drea the bunny, and that's just a bunny. There's no connection to it, no emotional content, no words, no stories, no growth, no nothing. Just I would look at the jumper, that's a jumper, that's it. No connection to my son. I also had no access to that additional layer, right? If I say that, my native language is no language at all, I'm not kidding about that. For me, this is a translation of things, a very crude translation, right? The gestalts that I'm mitigating in real time as a stage 9 or whatever, right? It takes energy to do that. And then in my life, as I've not felt safe to sound as I sound for various reasons, then I would remain silent and I would record how it felt, how the local dialect sounded and felt, and so on. And then I would practice how that sounds on my own, right? And then I would gradually ease into the vocal space of that context, whatever it was, primary school, jobs, and so on, where there's racism and so on. Um, and then I would have a very limited vocabulary, and I wouldn't really exercise stuff. And there was a time when I was in forensics, and there's a lot of homophobia, transphobia, queer phobia, foreign phobia. Is a very dark culture that I worked in, where I was so overwhelmed. Like I'd worked 5 shifts in a row, and I was so tired, and I had no energy to create that vocal skin, that overlay. And I came out, right, as me, and everybody's like, "Who the hell is this?" And then they would start to make fun of me, and that would make me feel worse because it's like, this is me. I'm not mimicking you at the moment. I'm not echoing you back at the moment. But that extra layer takes more energy, right? So here's my base layer for vocal space, and then to put that next layer on. And I lost access to that as well. I lost access to that energy space to be able to pull that off. To those scrapes and all of that stuff was just gone. And so it's like you if you're old enough to remember black and white television, right? It's like the color went out, and you bought a color TV, and then all of a sudden the color went out, and you're like, oh my gosh, what happened? That's a bit how it feels, but it was so terrible, terrible, terrorizing to
Mm.
say, well, why can't I keep this back? Why am I just looking at this? And it's just an item. I have lost the connection to it. And then I woke up the next morning after a very disturbing series of dreams, and it was still quiet, still gone. And the day was, I mean, fairly normal. It was a Sunday, but I didn't feel the connection like I normally do. I'd lost that attunement. I'd lost the ability to attune. I'd lost connection to the field, to meaning. And then Sunday night, massively bad dreams. Apparently, I was crying in my sleep. I woke up crying. My wife, amazing woman, good sport about it. There, Jamie. Let's talk it out. And then when I woke up, I could feel the connection had returned. Right. So whatever needed time to reset, reset. But when I was trying to figure out, because it's a brand new
mm,
phenomenon for me. I've never experienced anything as terrifying as that. There's no language for this in research and whatnot. And any kind of, you know, literature around in the psychiatric journals and stuff, this is all like depression, anxiety, panic or whatever. And that's not what happened. And so I began to kind of write and reference things that I'd written before and
mm,
kind of build a structure around like why this happened so that it won't happen again. Right. And then I shared that on the last Monday, and some of the things that I've been writing in the last month,
mm,
they made sense kind of retroactively, retrocausally. And so I referenced those back and it's been a week of kind of writing myself into coherence, I guess, and understanding and sharing that very Gestalt processor kind of breakdown, essentially. Because I don't
mm.
see anybody talking about, what happens in the Gestalt space when you've had enough, right? What does a circuit breaker look like, in that space when it cuts off? What happens? And so I wrote it, and to my eternal surprise, people commented positively, and they're like, "Wow, I never had a name for that," and thanks, and I need to sit with this, and these, types of comments. But I think I don't ever want to go through that again,
Yeah.
not at all. So very emotional week.
And it sort of, again, it brings me back to this, sort of idea that it's when I'm now thinking about the children or young people or adults that we're supporting, is that it's this much bigger picture. It's not just about that person's communication or language or play or sensory. It's that thinking about that whole. And just as you've described an experience where there were no scripts to get you out or an experience to relate to work out why this was going on. And I wonder, it kind of makes me curious about how many, you said obviously adults are writing to you. But imagine a child going through that, and the feeling, the scared, the fear must be huge.
Terrifying, right? And I think, a lot of stuff that I've been doing in classroom this week is
Mm,
testing and just the system requires its numbers and all of this kind of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
And usually my classroom is devoid of that. It's attuned, it's relational, it's we create a space together. We are respectful of each other. It's not, Dr. H is the teacher and you are the subject and, you will do as you're told. Um, but I think in terms of like clinical applications, when
Mm,
a student can respond in the moment, I don't push, you know. I'm more about maintaining that relational field and being attuned with children. And then like I'm never bored. I'm never like, oh my God, the clock is ticking so slowly. I'm never that way in my classroom, right? I enjoy the children. And my colleagues sometimes say things like, why don't I have the problems with the problem children that they have problems with? And I start with relationship.
yeah.
Um, I wrote, a couple of pieces on the other Substack about love and how I think the default state for Gestalt processors and love is to begin in love. We start in love with something, whether it's a person or a, stuffed bunny or whatever, and then, hold apart, right? So we fall in love with the whole situation. I love your clinic. I love the classroom or whatever. I love this person. I love this toy. And then if the condition does not support that, right, we find reasons, to fall out of love, then we do. And when we are completely out of love with that thing or that person, it's clean. It's done. The relational field is gone. There's nothing
Mm,
for it to stand on. And it looks like autistic coldness. right? Because we were so vibrant and everything, and now we are so incredibly distant. And I think it's because that relational field, that kind of fourth dimensional space that needs to exist, there's no more connection to it for us, for that thing or that person.
Mm,
And so, as you've said, it's not just Gestalt language processing, but it's Gestalt processing of life, of experience, of reality. If
mm,
I'm a Gestalt language processor, then I am a Gestalt love processor. I'm a Gestalt teaching processor and play processor and all these kinds of things. And I think, you know, I've noticed in my own writings that I've stopped talking about myself and the work as Gestalt language processing unless I'm speaking specifically about language. And then
yeah.
I'm just speaking more generically about Gestalt processing because I think that's what's happening, that we're processing whole to part in everything, you know. Um, and I think that's kind of an important distinction for me as a human, not as
Mm,
professional, not as
yeah,
the teacher or whatever. So that's kind of where I'm at this week, right? And I think about things that I've written, years ago or weeks ago or whatever, and I've revisit them and I think, well, I understand why I was there, but now I'm here, and the nice thing as a Gestalt processor of having that Substack space is I can store long thoughts there. And
yeah.
sometimes I come back to them 2 years, 3 years later, and I'm like, oh yeah, I need to kind of reload that, and then work with it and synthesize it and build from it. And so a lot of times there are hyperlinks in current articles that link back to the old stuff, because I didn't want to write 60 pages to you, on a Sunday morning. I want you to go back and read this or reference that or whatever. And I realize
Yeah.
people don't do it. That's
Funny
why
enough,
there's
I was going to say that's exactly what I love about your writing is you say, oh, if you want to know more about relational attunement, click on here and then, and I can find the other articles that you've written, the essays that you've written, or whether they might be about your clothes or your whatever it is that you're
yes.
referring to. Jamie, it's been a really lovely session. I'm sorry that it's been such a tough week. Um, I'm going to think, you've given me lots to think about this week. So thank you as always. And we'll see each other next week.
Yes, and as always, it's my pleasure, and thank you for being my therapist. You know, you can bill me by the hour, I guess, but no, thank you, and I always look forward to Saturday mornings for me. So thank you so
Me
much.
too. See you soon.
All right, bye bye.
Bye.